At WHYY, we're really thrilled to be able to offer you events like these, as well as tonight's wonderful and evocative conversation with Michael on his new book. It's entitled Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America. And I just need to show you the book so you'll know what it looks like when you buy it. Before we get started, we also wanted to let you know that tonight's event that we're quote sponsoring is with the Literary Cafe. And I just want to give a shout out to Vanessa Lloyd Scambati, who has been doing her thing with authors and promoting books for over 25 years now. And her African American Children's Book Fair is something to behold every February that she holds that. And it has been a service to Philadelphia. So we just want to thank Vanessa for that and for co-sponsoring this event. As your member-supported NPR and PBS station for Philadelphia, South Jersey, and Delaware, we'd like to thank all of you in the audience tonight, because without your support, we wouldn't be able to put on free programs like this. So thank you so very much. And if you've supported WHYY, especially in the last 10 months, while we've been going through this unprecedented time, we sincerely thank you. If you have any questions during this hour, we remind you to put them in the Zoom Q&A session. And now I'm happy to welcome Michael Eric Dyson. Hello, Michael. It's good to see you again.
Hey, Annette, John Hall, one of the greatest we have in the country today, and a remarkable writer, thinker, and anchor, broadcast host, and all-around intellectual. So it's great to hang out with you.
Well, let's hang out for a bit, shall we? You know, I just love the way you framed your book, because you wrote it as basically love letters to 7 African-American people who are no longer with us today, who lost their lives through violence of some sort. And can we just say their names really quickly, just go down the list, and let's talk just a little bit about who they were and how they lost their lives. So let's start with Elijah McClain.
Elijah McClain was a young 23-year-old Black man from Aurora, Colorado, right outside of Denver. A beautiful, sweet soul. Some have argued he was on the spectrum, but he played his violin for the pigeons and birds. He wanted to soothe them. His co-workers said he walked as if he had a gold orb around him, and he was anemic. So he had a ski mask on one night, well before COVID, last year, and walking home from a convenience store, and somebody called the police saying, it's probably not a problem, but you know, let me call anyway. And I wish people would think twice when they did that. Probably they didn't know it was a Black young man, but we know often the consequences are dire. So the police roll up on him. He begs them to respect his boundaries that he was speaking. Of course, they ignore him. They end up chokeholding him a couple of times, rendering him unconscious for no good reason. And he said, look, I wouldn't hurt a fly. I don't even eat meat. Not that I judge people who eat meat. It's as if, Annette, he's, in one sense, evincing and articulating the most desperate sort of politics of respectability that one could imagine. Look at me. I'm good. I don't hurt anybody. I don't harm anybody. Don't hurt me. And then he said how great they were. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. You're good people. Nothing would make a difference. And they crushed him into nothingness. And he got ketamine. When the EMT showed up to try to, quote, calm him down, he went into shock. And then a week later, he was dead. Emmett Till, I'm sorry, you want me to,
well, you know what? I think that this may take a while.
Okay,
so
you know what?
I want to make sure
that what I'll
do
is I'll be briefer. Y'all know Emmett Till, the young in Money, Mississippi, who was murdered in a vicious fashion when he was lynched and hung, shot, thrown into the river. And of course, he became a cause célèbre for the civil rights movement and made his way, in death, where he hadn't gone in life, to become a global icon. His mother insisted that Jet magazine show the disfigured face to show the world this is what happens. Eric Garner, young Black man, in his 40s, I think, from Staten Island. You heard him first when he said, "I can't breathe."
11 times he said that.
On the street, was that?
11 times he told
11 times. Sold Lucy cigarettes on the street, hustled as best he could, wasn't even doing it that day when they took him down, and Daniel Pantaleo, the policeman, put him in a chokehold, killed him. Breonna Taylor, the young Black woman, 26 years old, in Louisville, Kentucky, as you know, in her bed with her boyfriend. The cops come with a no-knock warrant, shoot into the apartment after the boyfriend shoots upon them, understandably, because he doesn't know who they are when they're trying to, ram their way into his door. They shoot back and kill Breonna Taylor. Her murderer has still not been held to account. And 3 policemen were there. Hadia Pendleton, the young 15-year-old Black girl from Chicago, shot in the back by supposedly, it is a gang member. She was mistaken for a gang member, or at least they were aiming for one and mistakenly shot her in the back into a crowd. She died. President Obama spoke about her in his State of the Union, and she highlighted what for some was a problem of, quote, Black on Black crime, which I argue with in this book. But nonetheless, she was killed by a young Black man, and the one who was his getaway driver. Both of them are now serving, I think, life in prison. Sandra Bland, young Black woman, left Chicago, went to Texas. She was going to teach. She become a staff member, I believe, at Prairie View A&M in Prairie View, Texas. Got into it with a policeman who stopped her in a traffic stop. She was standing up for her rights. It got ugly. He was brutal to her. 2 days later, she's found hung dead in her jail cell. And then Reverend Clemente Pinckney, Black minister of Emmanuel Church, and in South Carolina, in Charleston, I believe it was. One night, a young bigot and domestic terrorists went into the church, killed 9 people, including Reverend Pinckney. And before the bodies were cold, Black people offered their forgiveness. So that's who it is that we're talking about here tonight.
Yeah, that's who we're talking about. So yes, give an honor to them, certainly. And if you're counting victims at the hands of the police, because Hadia did not die at the hands of the police, this list easily could have been twice as long.
Oh my God. I mean, the book could have been filled. I found one chapter with a couple of pages of names of people, who were killed by police, who were murdered by police, whose lives were ended by police. We know that just today we're reckoning with what happened in Columbus, Ohio. A precious young Black man, is he, 21, 22, 23 years old, going into his home with his keys. He's still in the door, and a 5-year-old, I think, sibling and 72-year-old grandmother see him being shot and lying on the kitchen floor. It is astonishing, it is depressing, it is despairing, it is unconscionable, but it is real, and it continues to happen.
Yeah, and that's why, and Dr. Dyson, please forgive me if I front load all these questions, because there's so much that I want to get to with you tonight. So if you can bear with me, we know that this whole reckoning in contemporary times started with the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. And that was a catalyst for it all that we haven't seen, frankly, since the likes of the civil rights movement.
That's true.
And I want to get to white allies, because Here in Philadelphia, with the protests that went on almost every day after that happened, there were as many white people on the streets as they were Black people.
Mhm.
And, talking about, calls for racial justice and dismantling systemic racism. Why is everyone concerned about what you refer to as Black death now? I mean, what is it about this particular moment that kind of sounded the alarm for these newly woke white folks?
Yeah, I think that, as you said, George Floyd's death was a catalyst. Um, the cataclysm that we had endured, the chaos, the trauma, the tragedy that we had historically endured constantly, indicated to us that this was something horrible and tragic again. And yet, for the first time, many white brothers and sisters came to grips with this, as you said. I think for a few reasons. First of all, many of us were at home during the pandemic, and we were watching our screens. And we were paying much more attention to our iPhones, our iPads, our Samsungs, our Androids, looking at screens. And because we used them to communicate, because we couldn't be there in person. And so it gave a sense of enhanced intimacy for us to believe, that what we saw on screen was indeed what we felt in person. We had grown used to the fact that we were now communicating basically through these handheld devices or through computers and the like. There was digital communication, and so it made it real to us. Since we had been resigned to digital interactions, that digital sight we saw with him flashing across the screen was ever so real to us. Then I think white brothers and sisters got disabused of some of their stereotypes. Because despite the fact that Black people have been telling them all along, this stuff happens, you must have done something. You must have said something. You must have run. You must have tried to swing at the police. You must have tried to shoot him. And then we see prostrate on the ground, a Black man begging to breathe, saying to the cops that I can't breathe, and treating them with utter respect. Officer, please, right? And many white people said, wait a minute, this is not right. This is horrible. This is unconscionable. A man calling out for his mother, his recently dead mother, to help him, to support him, and to provide him perhaps safe escort from time to eternity. So a lot of white people saw that and got outraged because they knew that there was nothing that George Floyd was doing that deserved that he was doing, that he deserved to be murdered, that he deserved to be killed, that he deserved to have his life ended. And then finally, I think, people were taken aback by this, and they were determined to hit the streets because they felt this implicated their own complicity. Maybe I haven't spoken out enough. Maybe I haven't been as vocal as I should have been. And so all of that together allowed a lot of white folk, as you say, to show up in the streets and to protest this injustice. The biggest protest that we've had in the country since the 1960s, and really the largest protest against racial injustice ever in this nation, lets you know that even during COVID, and I think that's another factor, white brothers and sisters say, wait a minute. Some of them already felt sympathy for us because disproportionately Black and brown people had their bodies besieged by this virus and had a negative consequence and were dying at higher rates. But some of them felt empathy for us by saying, man, they've got to go through all this stuff and still face police brutality? This is too much. So I think all that together put us in position in this nation to respond as we did to this racial violence.
But just as a follow-up to that, Michael, what does it take and what does it mean to be a trustworthy white ally? Because you know, a lot of the outrage, well, Black people understandably felt sincere outrage, but they were looking at a lot of white people side eye, as if, you know, white people were appropriating their anger, you know, their sadness, their weariness. What does it take to be an effective white ally, and one that Black people can trust?
Yeah, well, you got to have thick skin, because, you know, with that accusation, you know, what white folk probably think, well, damn, they wanted us to get involved. Finally, we get involved and they're looking at us side-eyed. What are we to do? You know, if I'm a white person, I got to admit, I'm like, well, damn. Geez, Jamaica, I was trying for all these years to communicate and I wasn't doing a good job, and you were telling me I hadn't. And now I stand up and you think I'm appropriating your grief. I'm so sorry. All due respect and love and understanding with my white brothers and sisters as I engage in that stereotypical articulation of a white voice. But here's the thing. You know, Greg Tate, the social critic, says white folk want everything but the burden of Blackness. They want the love, the style, the joie de vivre, but they don't want the heartbreak and the heartache. This is the part they don't want. And to the credit of many white people, they said, we're going to stand with you. We're going to be involved in Black Lives Matter. Two of the men who died in the protests, who were white, you know, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, lost their lives trying to stand with Black brothers and sisters and other citizens of conscience. So I think being a good ally is having a thick skin, being able to say, even when Black people are skeptical, you sure? Who are you? You the FBI? What are you doing? And they're able to stand and say, nope, I ain't the FBI. But I am, you know, FBI for Black interests. So I can't be with you. You know, and fully behind individuals who look like you. So yeah, the thing is, or for Brothers Incorporated. But anyway, so the thing is that many white brothers and sisters, you know, get in where they can fit in, so to speak. They come in at the level of their interest and awakening. And because Black brothers, you know, brothers and sisters have been asking white brothers and sisters to step up, many of them stepped up during this outrageous racial conflagration and showed their due respect for our struggle. And so I think that white allyship is about acknowledging that they got to learn more, they got to study more. It can't just be about learning and studying. It also has to be about integrating what they learn into a pattern of behavior that channels and that chastises the kinds of white privileges, the sense of white innocence, the sense of white comfort that may be theirs. And to be able as a white ally to be self-critical, to be introspective, and to, if not police, then at least be keenly aware of the contradictions that exist in their own thinking and behavior, and to challenge other white brothers and sisters to step up to the plate and to not, you know, cry white tears to exploit white empathy for being battered by Black awareness, by being battered by wokeness, by being offended by the vigor and aggression with which some Black people have begun to pursue their agenda of justice. So being a white ally is being complicit with us in the most creative fashion, the most imaginative ways to interrupt the system, to subvert it, to destroy it, to distort it, to resist it, and to challenge it, and to stand side by side and make their bodies equally vulnerable as ours, as those two beloved figures did in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or before that with Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about police reform, because here in Philadelphia, that part of understanding how structural racism works is understanding how the Philadelphia Police Department operates.
Right.
As you well know, Michael, Philadelphia has had a notorious history of the Blue Plague, as you put it in your book.
Mm-hmm.
From the Rizzo years, through the MOVE bombings and the standoff, to the October killing of Walter Wallace Jr.
Right.
And, you know, we just looked at 10 years of racial bias and stop and frisk. It's been 10 years after the city was sued and the police department was sued for racial bias and stop and frisk. But Philadelphia police still employs that tactic, that racial profiling tactic.
Right.
And the police oversight committee is in name only, you know, it has no teeth.
Right.
Critics say that it allows the police to police themselves. You know, so advocates are calling for defunding the police,
Right.
which, you know, broken down means a lot of things. But folks like former President Barack Obama say that that particular phrase turns people off and could be the reason that some Democrats lost on the down ballot in this year's election.
Mm-hmm.
Are we getting caught up in semantics here, or is that slogan really taking away from true legitimate demand in view of everything that the police has done over the years?
Right. No, it's a beautiful, complicated question. And it warrants a beautiful, complicated answer that I hope I can at least match your eloquence. You know, look, when President Obama said that, a lot of leftists got upset, and I understand why. Are you more outraged at the outrage of people who have been hurt, or are you more outraged at the hurt? And it seems like, you know, you see dogs in a fence and somebody on the outside trying to come in, and one of the dogs is barking at the other dog who's barking at the person trying to come in the fence. So if we're barking at each other, we ain't barking at the threat outside the fence. And I think that President Obama might have been barking at the other dogs in the fence, but on the other side are the people trying to come in. Now, he would say that, no, I'm trying to give you game. I'm trying to put you on game. I'm trying to hip you to how this thing works and what people hear. So on the one hand, I think those who talk about defunding the police are talking about what? Rearranging the architecture of public safety, redesigning through imaginative means what policing looks like, what public safety looks like, which means we can move money from one area to another. We don't mind defunding public education. We don't mind defunding social services for poor Black people, but all of a sudden, we got a problem with defunding the police. Police unions are powerful out of all proportion to their numbers in the community. And often they are racially insensitive and sometimes racially charged. And so they ain't policing themselves. They will not be reliable inventories. They will not create reliable inventories of themselves. They will not take reliable inventory of their own practices. You know, that's why the Justice Department under Obama with Eric Holder came with those consent decrees for some of these police departments, because they found them extremely problematic, racist in some instances, and wanting in most. So, you know, policing the police is not something that's very effective. So we want to hold the police accountable. And I think it would have been better for President Obama to have said, look, I don't want to have my words used to hurt the people who are trying to do the right thing. Even as I suggest to them that one way you say it will be more effective than another way you might say it. And had he had the background where people could have trusted that that was his purpose, think about it. When he was the president, he wasn't trying to dismantle the police. He wasn't trying to defund the police. He was battling after he made the comments about stupid policing with Henry Louis Gates in his first year. He was trying to regain the trust of the police and didn't want to do too much to undermine their authority. So, you know, you're dealing with Pharaoh when you're dealing with Obama. You got to talk about the children of Israel when you talk about the defunders. And, you know, Pharaoh let my people go. Yeah, we're used to being different races, but that's the same race. And I'm not dissing Obama. That's a job description. Pharaoh, you in head of the government, but the people of Israel out here going, look, we ain't asking Pharaoh how to be free.
Yeah.
And Obama basically is Pharaoh, but he's playing both ends of the fence, so to speak. Now, on the other hand, he's going to say, I've been there and done this, and I know how this feels, and I know how these people think. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the left should be less hypersensitive and willing to be self-critical, even as they say, no, we ain't just trying to reform the police, President Obama. We're trying to defund them for real. We're trying to take away their teeth. We're trying to make sure that when somebody is called for Walter Wallace, that it is people who are informed. There are people who have therapeutic backgrounds who can identify a person going through a psychotic break and don't murder that person or kill that person or otherwise unduly harm that person. And why is it that the family deliberately didn't want the police to come for fear that the outcome would be just what it was? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, be upset about that. I wish the former president could have gotten more upset about that, a little bit more enraged about that. We know he's a pretty calm customer, pretty cool customer, and he ain't gonna get too excited about too much. But would that he would have put a little bit more juice and energy behind those who are trying to make a difference in their arguments about defunding the police. And on the other hand, let's be real, you know, do you want the commercial or the product? Do you want somebody to announce it and then you never get it in the mail? Or do you want it in the mail without somebody announcing it? You just got the thing itself, what Kant called the ding on zitch, right? I ain't cussing. So the thing is that, you know, Obama has a point in the sense that if your purpose is to convince a great group of people, a great amount of people, that to defund the police is critical, or to reimagine the police, use different words. Talk about reimagining the police. Talk about being capable of having a new design and architecture for public safety. Speak about it in different terms. At that level, I think that there is something reasonable to be said, but only after acknowledging, I don't care what you call it, if people are opposed to it, it don't make no difference. You could call it hookah baruka, and they would go like, hookah baruka, what is that? No, we do not believe that hookah baruka will be sufficient in addressing police problems because you just want to destroy them. Hookah baruka is just another word for you want to defund them. So people would have gotten to it. And let's be real. If we change the name of what Colin Kaepernick was doing, hey, why don't you just not do it during the flag, not do it during the anthem? They're going to tell you what they believe it is anyway. They're going to always have a problem. That's why the people in charge who are doing their imperial best to keep you subordinate are not the consultants for what you do to get free. Well,
that is the truth. And I just want to get into the election a little bit because so much of this is connected to Donald Trump and how he ran the country for 4 years. You know, in a chapter of your book that you call White Comfort, you write about the racist system designed to keep Black people down and to give white people comfort. And, you know, Trump really perpetuated that during his 4 years in office. And now he's on this campaign, although, you know, it's dying down, to try to reverse Joe Biden's victory. And what we see in that, Michael, is a disenfranchisement of hundreds of thousands of voters, a disproportionate number of them Black, living in urban centers like, you know, here in Philadelphia, Atlanta, your native Detroit. You know, voter suppression is nothing new,
right?
But what is it about this newfound energy among voters? I'm pivoting here because although I mentioned Atlanta, what we saw in Atlanta too was many young Black voters. They found new energy. They stood in line for hours and hours all day to vote in the primaries. Many Democrats, and they're looking to transform places like Atlanta, Georgia in the South. My question is, despite everything the Trump administration has tried, do you think we can see the South transforming permanently?
That's a great question. I think the South has waged war, civil war, bitterly opposed war between kin for so long that it almost seems like the eternal war, an eternal civil war, an internal schism, an internal diatribe of one brother against the next, of one sister against the next, of one family member against the next. And though the South has borne the reputation for being regressive, in some instances, there has been more progress in the South than in the North or in the East, because people are forced to confront each other and deal with each other, and therefore they've tried to work out, in some instances and places, their soul salvation together, black and white. We know that there are many more races and ethnicities in this country, but for the argument's sake tonight, talking about the black-white divide, the black-white divide has been the major artery through which the blood of bigotry has flowed throughout the body politic for some time. But yeah, I think that the change in the South is real too, though. And this is why you saw in Atlanta a purging of 500,000 voters, but Stacey Abrams got into order, kicked into high gear, and among others, and figured out a way to battle what you talked about as the voter suppression, all the shenanigans and tricks that people were using to prevent the flourishing of the Black franchise. Brian Kemp, when he was Secretary of State, how you gonna be Secretary of State and counting the votes between you and Stacey Abrams? If anybody had an argument about fraud, it would have been Stacey Abrams, not Donald Trump, who fell far short of the Electoral College numbers as well as the popular vote by 6-7 million voters. So I think the possibility of the South changing is something that is significant. I think it certainly can manifest some of that change. Its willingness to grapple with its own checkered history, the nefarious activities, the lynchings, the hangings, the murders, the bombings. And I certainly hope the South can change, because me moving there to teach at Vanderbilt University in Nashville means that me and my family gonna be there. So I hope to God it is changed.
Well, we will certainly see in January with this runoff election.
Yeah, that's right, in Georgia, to see whether Ossoff and Warnock can win over Perdue and Loeffler. And I tell you, it's astonishing that there are even runoffs, because the two Democratic candidates are just heads and shoulder above in terms of integrity, in terms of intelligence, in terms of inspiration than their cohort, who are relying upon their wealth and their riches to support their efforts to represent the people of Georgia in the Senate.
Well, since we're on the subject of the election, Michael, I have to go here. While 95% of Black women voted for Joe Biden, about 12% of Black men voted for Trump. What was that all about? Why was Kanye West supporting him? Why was Lil Wayne supporting him? Why did Ice Cube agree to partner with him to do an investment plan for Black people? Why was 50 Cent saying he was supporting the president and then took it back? What was that about? What is that about?
Yeah, I mean, some of his bravado, Trump has swagger. He says what he thinks. He don't care who hears him or not, right? Some of the rappers agree with that. Some of the rappers are sexist, so they don't find his sexism problematic. Some of the rappers believe in predatory fetishism of sexual identity and women, seeing them as subordinate to their own crotch. So, they ain't gonna have no problem with that. Some think that he was giving them a check, especially when it came to HBCUs. So Black men of that generation, some of them thought so that, that he would be their friend. So the uptick from 13% to 18% in this last election. I mean, they gained even 5 more points, and Black women upticked by 4 points. But Black women still overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden, and so did Black men overwhelmingly vote for Joe Biden. But the truth is that there is some tricky interactions there. The bravado, the sexism, the misogyny, the braggadociousness, the braggadocio about, you know, monies you have and cars and women and the like. So there was a kind of ethic of bravura at the heart and bravado that so many young people, young black men, young black rappers in particular, may have been drawn to. But I think the majority of black men kept their wits about them and understood that this vicious racism that had been unleashed during his time, that is of President Trump's, should come to an end and must be stopped by all means necessary.
But I mean, is it legitimate to say that for some people, and I'm not just talking about rappers or black men, but black people feel like they've been taken advantage by the Democratic Party, that, you know, these progressives are just progressives in name only. And when you dig a little deeper, you see that Joe Biden supported the crime bill, and you see that, you know, Obama, you know, didn't push back on certain things.
Right.
You know, is there some legitimacy to that? Or just the people who say, look, I'm tired of a two-party system. You
Right.
know, I want another alternative. You know, is there legitimacy to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's legitimacy to saying I'm tired. I'm tired of two-party system. I'm tired of what goes down. No doubt about that. But the answer ain't to push further to the right. The answer is not to tack more aggressively toward a demagogue or a fascist. It is to challenge the inherent inequality of a two-party system. But to say you don't want to vote, to refrain from engaging in exercising the franchise and leveraging your authority as a citizen, to me is political suicide. And we've got to speak up and speak out and be critical. Yes, you know, of the political figures who represent us. Yes, Joe Biden supported the crime bill, but so did a bunch of black ministers. So did a bunch of black politicians. So did a bunch of black figures, you know, in our community who felt that crack cocaine was destroying us. I was there. I heard them. So don't just try to put that on the white man. Don't just put that on Bill Clinton or Joe Biden. There were many black people who were afraid of what crack cocaine would do and felt that this unprecedented scourge of a drug would continue to devastate our communities unless we did something dramatic. And so, you know, it's like when you throw the rocks and hide your hands, black people have to own up to how much we were invested in that crime bill and how much we supported it in the end.
Yeah. I just want a reminder to our audience that we are about to come up on the Q&A portion of our conversation. I see one question in the Q&A. You guys, I'm sure you have questions. It's not every night that we have Michael Eric Dyson with us. And so if you would put your question in the Q&A so I can look at it, because that's really the only multitasking I can do on Zoom. Talk, ask questions, and look at the Q&A.
Right.
So you could do that. You know, we're in the midst of this pandemic. And we all know, getting back to systemic racism, even in a pandemic, we see it in full effect. Healthcare. The data shows that people of color receive less care and often worse care than whites, and their outcomes are worse. We see environmental racism play out in certain Black neighborhoods, poor Black neighborhoods, where there are, you know, refineries. And we just had a refinery blow up in South Philadelphia, where a number of Black people live, where there was a cancer cluster. You know, the outcomes are worse. There are a lot of reasons for that, but racial stereotyping plays a big part in that. I've had my girlfriends pregnant girlfriends go and see a doctor, and and tell them something was wrong, and the doctor sent them home. You
Right.
know, this has been historical, from the Tuskegee study and the sterilization of women of color without their permission to sky high infant mortality rates among Black babies. Communities of color are understandably mistrustful of their healthcare systems.
Wow. Yeah.
So knowing that, knowing that, and knowing that people of color make up the disproportionate number of people who contact COVID, how do you think they'll respond to receiving a COVID vaccine? And should they receive a vaccine? And are you going to receive a vaccine?
Oh boy. That hard-hitting Annette John Hall. My God. Let me start where you began. Yeah, Black people are right to be skeptical and suspicious of the use of science. Black people don't distrust science, they distrust scientists. They ain't scared of medicine, they're scared of doctors who do things that are hurtful and painful. The Tuskegee experiment, down to a study that came out the other week that said that even Black babies have a better chance of survival if they have Black doctors. My God, babies? It doesn't mean that there are white doctors around, oh ho, we don't like you. It means that if you are Black, you have more sympathy, more understanding, more love, more nurture, more care and concern for those children, for those infants, that might explain you going an extra mile, an extra 2 miles, to make sure that things are right and well. So, I think it is the fact that Black people have a legitimate reason. The Tuskegee experiment, where they allowed syphilis to run its course without notifying the people that they were infected, and doing nothing, even when they discovered medicine, to relieve their suffering and pain. So that's deeply inscribed. The cellular memory of the collective Black community has not yet recovered from that. And then when you look at studies that say that Black people don't even get the same treatment when they go to the hospital, even if you control for class, they're in the same class, make the same kind of money. Black people show up, don't get the kind of aggressive treatment that white brothers and sisters get. So all that is a reason to be skeptical and to be suspicious and to hold people accountable, which we should, who are medical professionals. On the other hand, this COVID is kicking Black butt, is kicking brown butt. So yeah, if they get that vaccine worked out and enough people take it and it's good, your boy is right in line, because I'm 62 years old. I'm in that category. I'm in that, in that number, so to speak, that the risks get higher and get greater, and as your age runs higher. And so, I'm trying to protect myself, socially distanced, wearing masks and the like, but ain't no guarantee anyway, washing my hands. So yeah, my wife presently is involved in the protocol to take the test, to show our children and grandchildren that she's willing to be sacrificial, not just a guinea pig, but to see what it feels like, to determine what its effects will be, and to be honest in reporting them. She's a brave woman. I said, let me know what that is, because I ain't going with you, but I'm glad you're doing it, so you can work it out and let the rest of the family understand what's at stake.
Well, if you do it, I'll do it. How about that?
Very good, very good. Let's do it. Man.
We've got some questions here in the Q&A
right.
that I
want
to ask.
Questions. Let's go at it. We got a few minutes. Let's go.
We got a few minutes. Let's go. Hi, Charmaine. I'm going to ask Charmaine Matlock Turner's question first. She says, thank you, Annette and Michael. How do you believe it's best to educate potential white allies about the history of racism in America and the economic systems that they created to support it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the reasons some Black people get so frustrated is and tired, they say, well, white brothers and sisters, the book's already done been written. As brothers would say, already been done wrote. And, you know, Du Bois wrote a long time ago, but he's still real, he's still relevant. You know, figures are still writing now. Ibram Kendi in his book on anti-racism, or Robin DiAngelo, her book on white fragility, Brian Stevenson on his book on just mercy, just to name recent books. Hopefully my book, long time coming, and the previous book, Tears We Cannot Stop. I mean, people out here writing books, doing their thing. And it's enough literature out here for y'all to know. But at the same time, we got to direct and suggest, and we're able to do that. Those of us who study, who read, who think, who grapple with these ideas are more than ready to share those resources, but we want to make sure that our white allies are willing to engage them, willing to study, willing to be self-critical, willing to go home and apply the knowledge they get to their own situation and apply it to the jobs they have, to the domestic spaces they occupy, to integrate the cry for systemic racism's end into their very existence, into their very everyday life.
Yes, thank you, Charmaine, for that question.
Thank you, Charmaine.
Let's see. Jeffrey has a question, Jeffrey Grundy. In what practical ways can the Biden administration begin to reduce the financial inequalities between Blacks and non-white, between whites and non-whites in society?
Well, practical ways are, you know, figure out the disparity in housing that allows some people to gain equitable housing and others not to have it. We're still redlining, whether we want to believe it or not. And we end up putting Black people in worse neighborhoods. Property values decline, are not very high. They don't get the bang for their buck, and on the resale, they don't make much money. The entree into the middle class is usually done by means of home ownership. So we gotta fix that up. Also, the real wages of Black people. Can we talk about raising the minimum wage? Can we put forth arguments and legislation that would help do that in Congress to forward the objective of those who are permanently stuck at the bottom of society's totem pole? But also, we can talk about figuring out what to do with educational disparities, because there's a one-to-one, not a one-to-one correlation, but there is some relationship between the kind of education you have and the kind of money you make and the kind of job you have. And so, you know, if we want to enhance the plight and predicament and the situation and standing of Black people, we got to figure out that educational disparity and figure out how to reduce it in order for us to be prosperous in this nation. A lot more things to be done, but those are some very practical things in terms of redistributive mechanisms, figuring out ways that Black wealth needs to be enhanced. The housing bubble bled off the greatest wealth of Black America in the history of this nation. And so if we can recoup some of that, we can at least begin to establish a predicate and a basis for Black wealth.
Renee has a question, and this is an interesting question because this has happened so much right here in Philadelphia. Black trans women being killed and assaulted. Right. Does your book also address the disproportionate violence experienced by Black trans women? Or can you discuss recommendations for this vulnerable subpopulation?
Right, I definitely address it, but not nearly as much as I could or should have. Not nearly as much as it deserves to be addressed. You know, when I talk in general about, you know, trans people, bisexual, gay, lesbian folk, you know, we got to talk about all of this in our own community, and using our religion to beat down on those who are sexually minoritized people. And trans women in particular are victims not only of police harassment, but of neighbor to neighbor carnage in Black and brown communities, where trans people are still seen as the carrier of a particular virus. And the same way we're trying to fight COVID-19, they seem to possess a dis-ease to us because we are uneasy in their sexual choices that we try to deny legitimacy to them. And that's something we got to give up. See, we have to be Black and gay, Black and, so, you know, talking about Blackness and sexual identity, Blackness and gender, Blackness and, you know, class and the like. We can never afford to be narrow in trying to talk about the forces that continue to oppress us as a people in various ways and in various constituencies in different ways.
This from Cheryl Dick, which I think is a really good question. Do you think that faith groups can begin rebuilding trust with faith-based decency regarding gender, multicultural, and the scandal regarding the abuse of our children?
Well, I hope so. But the tragedy is the church has too often been involved in all of that stuff on the wrong side. And if the church could purge its own homophobia, its own transphobia, you know, its own anti-gay sentiments, trying to justify and legitimate, you know, the attack on gay and lesbian and transgender and bisexual and queer and, you know, other folk, queer plus people. You know, we're doing it ourselves, trying to use the Bible to make God co-sign our bigotry. And God ain't here to co-sign your bigotry. God is here to say that all of these people are my children. I remember preaching in Cleveland, Ohio. I didn't mean to name the city, but I've already done it. And I'm preaching in Cleveland, and a woman came up to me, a Black woman. She said, "You know you're going to hell." I was like, wow, did Jesus tell you that already? Like, man, I guess I don't have to watch my cholesterol, huh? Okay, whatever. I said, why am I going to hell? You know why you're going. Because you preach that God created gay people. I said, ma'am, and you think I'm going to hell? You're a polytheist. You think there's a God for straight people and one for gay people? Come on, and one for trans people? That ain't how it works. Either God made everything and everybody, or God ain't made nothing and nobody. Ain't no in between. Either God created all of it or God didn't create none of it. Just like the same way when people say, well, the Lord put Donald Trump in office. Did the Lord put Barack Obama in there? Did the Lord put Joe Biden there? Because if you say God put one of them there, then God put them all there. And what should you make of it? Well, maybe we should make of it. I don't think God determines or decides for us who we shall elect. I think God makes clear what the standards of the Bible and God's expectation, the standards of God's expectation are to love mercy, do justly, and walk humbly with thy God. And I think God says, you know, I want just situations. I want fairness. I want people to be able to love and embrace one another. And then we figure out the people who more closely match, or who most closely match the ideals that we put forth. So in that sense, we got to challenge the church to live up to what its possibilities are. Instead of being homophobic, be anti-homophobic. Instead of being anti-Black, be anti-Black. Be pro-Black. Be pro-brown people and red and yellow people and indigenous people. We got to figure out ways to embrace and enhance each other and to support each other along the way. The church can do that, but the church must, you know, stop navel-gazing, and be far more, you know, willing to be self-critical about our own practices.
Well, I know that you have a hard out at 7 o'clock, and I'm going to try to get you out of here on time. So I reserve the right to ask the last question, which is this. I know you're a Baptist preacher.
Right.
I'm AME, but I won't hold you. I won't hold.
I hope you join a real church one day. Oops. All right. We just joking. AME is a real church on most days.
But I need to like loop back and tie the bow on this.
Mm-hmm.
vast majority of police officers who killed the people that you wrote letters to, nothing has happened.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing has happened to them. But yet, I've heard you on various shows
Mhm.
talking about hope, that you have hope. You know, one of my favorite scriptures is Isaiah 40:31 that says, and you know this, for those who have hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They'll soar on wings like eagles. They'll run and not grow weary. They
Right.
will walk and not be faint. I guess my question is, do Black people need hope to stave off our weariness?
Absolutely. Hope is vital. Hope is critical. Hope is the lifeblood of our survival. Hope is the basis of our flourishing. Hope is the basis of our imagination. Because if you can't hope, you can't wish that you could move beyond your present circumstance in order to embrace a new future. Hope is a down payment from the future or on the future. It's a borrowing from the future, a reimagining of what is possible. And the only means we can get there is by means of walking on hope. Faith is extremely important. Love is extremely important. But to hope and to believe that this can turn about. Otherwise, why would you struggle? Why would you protest? You hope that things will change. And yes, I maintain hope. Hope is different than optimism. Optimism is, putting some spit on your finger and trying to figure out which way the wind is blowing. Whereas hope says, even if it looks like it's not going to do well, we're going to stand tall and overcome. So yes, at the end of the day, I'm still hopeful.
The book is called Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America. Michael Eric Dyson, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Annette John Hall, thank you so kindly. All of y'all who joined us tonight, thank y'all so much. Love y'all. Miss Philly. Love everything about that city and appreciate y'all so much. Vanessa Lloyd Scombati, WHYY, everybody involved in the great Annette John Hall. Thank you so very kindly.
Thank you so much.
All right, take good care.